Hi, I'm Rick McEvoy from TD Synnex. I'm a technical pre-sales consultant focused on the Dell enterprise portfolio. So basically what that means is I speak to partners and end users, help them design their solutions that they need to run whatever their IT is, and work with partners to enable them to deliver that to their customers themselves. What I presented today was around locating your workloads in the right place. For a long time, there has generally been seen as a one-size-fits-all. You commit to where you run your IT workloads, whether it's on-premise, in the cloud, or some kind of hybrid environment. That has changed a lot today. So my presentation was designed to help people identify what their workloads are and where the different options for them to locate it are. And as a result of that, choose the right one for them for each individual workload. Thanks everyone for coming. You're going to hear a lot of information over the day today about the right technologies and what's new and what sort of innovations there are in the market, right, in the IT space today. But all of that is predicated on understanding what workloads you're running, right? Because there is no one size fits all. Right, we need to make sure we're running the right workloads in the right place. So that's what I'm going to cover off first to hopefully set the scene for the rest of the day. So first up, I'm going to cover off how do we assess those workloads for you? What are your options? What are the kind of trade-offs you have to make or compromises you have to make in each of those scenarios? Features around people's in-house capabilities, strengths and weaknesses, governance and compliance and security, sustainability. Have a bit of time, hopefully, for Q&A, and then just reinforce the kind of key takeaways from all of the above. So, without further ado, how do we assess workloads? So there's one thing, us going, here's a list of the virtual machines that we're running, right? And that should give you an indication of what you've provisioned, what resource you have allocated, right? But that's only half of the story. It doesn't tell you how that's running and what impact that's having on your infrastructure. So what we need to know is how do these workloads interact with each other? What takes preference? What takes more resource than you're expecting it to? And realistically, each of the workloads that you'll be running doesn't always need to be running in the same place. So if you look at most of the workloads that most of our customers will be running, it will be some kind of business intelligence or CRM platform like an SAP, account systems, maybe Sage, something like that, some kind of video conferencing. The fancy ones who don't care about paying massive license fees might be running Oracle. Most people run some kind of Office suite. And more often we're seeing not necessarily ChatGPT, but some form of AI implementation. I don't want to tread on Paul's presentation too much, but these are all like the transforming nature of workloads that we're seeing in enterprises as we go to customers nowadays. So how do we know what these are all doing besides these other resources we've allocated to the VMs? So that's where we use an assessment tool. Now, the one that we use is a Dell tool called Live Optics. Oh, so glad that animated that way. So what does Live Optics do? It basically sits on your network and reports telemetry. So how much of your CPU is allocated, how many sockets you've got, how many cores you've got, how much total clock speed you've got, how much is actually being used at peak usage. How much storage do you have? How much is free? How much is used? Same for memory. Average writes, IOPS, network throughput, even down to the physical layer of what servers do you have? What's the makeup of those servers? We can go into the physical summary, so go into how many CPUs, what drives, so on and so forth, but we can go into the VM level and say, well, what does our average VM look like? Well, it's got 4 virtual CPUs, 1.3 gig of RAM, 12 gig, it gives you that kind of information. We can even take it a further step. And this is really important when we're designing systems. you can go into a list of all the VMs so you can identify outliers. So it's one thing to size something from your average VM, but if your average VM is saying you need 4 virtual CPUs, 8 gig of RAM, 16 gig of storage, which is a very odd configuration, but let's just go with it. If your average VM is doing that, but 80% of your VMs are running with 1 CPU, and then you've got 5 that are running at 16 cores, you don't want to size the units, your actual individual hosts with 8 core CPUs, right? Nothing will work. You'll get contention, it will fall over. So we can go down into a list of all the outliers, exactly what those look like from a resource perspective, so we can size the environment properly. Historically, we've used this to give us an idea of what physical infrastructure we want to put in place. Right? That's not always the case now. But what it gives us is the idea of what resource do we need? What latency do we need to bear in mind? What throughput do we need? How often are we even using this data? And then you get an automated insights report. Thankfully, I waited to try and guess what that acronym was until I had it up on the screen. And what the automated insights report, it gives you all that information again in a slightly more user-friendly view. So you don't need to be clicking through all kinds of different windows. Gives you everything about the virtual machines. Also gives you cloud pricing. So you can go down to either the full infrastructure, if you were to run it on any of these main clouds. You can go down to a subset of VMs. You can go down to an individual VM. And this is very important because it means that we're not just saying, again, one size fits all. Because there might be some that you're barely using and just long-term retention of data. Why are we putting a lot of money into infrastructure to have it sat there and never used? Doesn't make any sense. So that's where we can use these reports. So that's how we assess the workloads. That's how we can see everything that you're currently running and maybe assess whether there might be a different solution. If everyone wants it all on-prem, great. We can use that information to make a full on-prem solution, but that's not necessarily the case. So what are our options? This looks better on a small screen. Slightly blurry at this scale, but we are where we are. Essentially, we'll talk about 3 main placement locations, either edge, core, and cloud. So what do we mean by edge? Well, this will be a remote branch. This will be, if we're talking in terms of hospitals or nursing homes, it's going to be one of the branch locations rather than the core, which is your central data center that you may or may not already have, where the majority of stuff happens. You'll still need to do some processing. Some applications will need to run at the edge. And it's getting the right solution in that area. And then on the other end, we also have cloud options, right? And as I say, this is where I start sounding like a broken record, right? There is no one size fits all. You can do everything in the cloud. You could do everything in the core. It doesn't mean it's going to be the best way to do it. And increasingly, as our role as IT professionals changes, it's less about making sure that we have the right tin to make stuff work. And it's more about identifying where the best place to run these different workloads is. Okay? So, having said that about tin, I'm going to go over some tin now. And what I'm going to do is show you the main 16th generation Dell server portfolio. Now, what's different about this portfolio versus historical portfolios is a lot more thought's been put into it around why do we have these products? You know, most server portfolios, you'll see lower number to higher number and all the increments, and that's just how it is. You've got good number, small number okay, bigger number better, biggest number best, right? That's how it works. In the 16th generation portfolio, Dell decided to go about slightly differently and started to look at having specific use cases for different hardware. So yeah, we've got all the core stuff, right? The stuff that's going to sit in your data center, or military, banking, retail, all these places that traditionally run everything out of a data center. Okay, so huge virtual server farms, loads of hosts, all this kind of stuff. But there's other use cases, stuff like cloud service providing, stuff around edge, workloads around AI and ML that again, may be in here, maybe there, maybe sitting in a completely different location. So it's no good just having that linear range with good number, small number okay, bigger number best, right? That's not the way to make a range anymore. And that's why Dell have come up with the 16G portfolio. Pretend that's not there because I haven't done the animation, right? That's not there yet. I'm going to start with talking some edge products, right? So I'm going to start with the XR4000. This is actually 2 server nodes in a 2U chassis, or it can be just a stackable, if you think about a pair of Timberland boots, right? The size of a box that those come in, it's the size of an XR4000. And that is a 2-node solution. You can actually run it as a hyper-converged solution because it has an integrated witness node built into the chassis. So it's a full hyper-converged solution. Oh, I'm on the clock here. It's a full hyper-converged solution the size of a quite large shoebox. XR8000 is the same, but up to 4 nodes. These are more edge in the traditional sense to sit in maybe a telecoms cab at the side of the road or a mobile phone site, that kind of stuff. So they're slightly ruggedized. They're into the mainstream. And this is where we do have a little bit of smaller number good, bigger number better, right? And what we mean by that is the larger the number, the first number, the more configurable it is. So the more expansion capability you'll have, the more cores you may be able to have. So the 8 and 9 are the 4 sockets, so you can get 4 processors in there, right? That's what we mean by larger number better. We also have some outliers, so XD2, extreme density. This means we can get up to 24 3.5-inch drives in a 2U server rack. Great storage density for things like CCTV, things like backup targets. We even have, I'll get to that, don't worry, slide. We even have these XS models, which allow us to be more cost effective in that mainstream enterprise space, because it doesn't necessarily have support for the big platinum CPUs, because not every customer wants them, right? So why put that extra cost into the platform? We'll make a slightly more cost-effective solution. Then this one, which I'm not going to talk about too much, because Paul's going to talk HPC and AI later, but we have a section of the range that is designed for accelerated compute, whether that be HPC, whether that be AI. This box up here, without going into all of these boxes, this is the first solution from anyone other than NVIDIA themselves that allows you to run 8 H100 GPUs in one chassis. Okay. All right. I just feel like it's rushing me at this point. I'm not really going to go a lot into modular, apart from to say they're there. We didn't used to call these products modular. Most people would call them blades, but we're not allowed to do that anymore. I'm going to blame marketing because they're not in the room. So they're modular systems. You build them up as you go, but we see less and less need for them anymore. If anyone wants to ask me why, I can explain it when I'm not on the clock. We also have specific models which are stripped right down, almost bare metal, for cloud service providers. So they don't have any of the value add stuff in there that we put around the iDRAC, around the Open Manage, around all the Dell wraparound. It's just all about getting dense, cheap servers. We don't currently sell them in the UK. Basically, they're into people like GCP, Amazon, larger scale, hyperscalers. That's what HS in the product name stands for. Okay. So this is quite an in-depth range. But what if you want something that's going to allow you to hit each of those points that we talked about earlier, core, edge, and cloud? Well, that's where we start talking about hybrid cloud environments or hybrid multi-cloud environments. where you can truly run your workloads where the best place to run them is, okay? And kind of the gold standard in the Dell world for this is VMware, or VxRail. I'm going to put aside certain conversations about VMware because we're kind of, again, on the clock here. But feel free to have these conversations offline when I'm about later on. But VxRail was the first hyperconverged platform designed by a tier 1 vendor alongside VMware. Right? So this is co-developed with VMware. So if you're looking for a hyperconverged solution, if you're a VMware house, this is the turnkey system for you. And it can come in any number of flavors. As you can see, it's almost like I planned it, edge, core, cloud. So you can have hyperconverged solutions. If you take that bezel off, it's that XR4000 that I showed you earlier. Right, so this is a very small VxRail implementation at the edge. You can even do satellite nodes as one node. You can have it in your data center as a core solution, as a traditional scale up, scale out, well, not scale up, scale out HCI platform. You can even use dynamic nodes, which makes it more of a disaggregated HCI approach, and attach a PowerStore SAN. You can use the new ESA clusters, and what really makes it a hybrid multi-cloud solution is VMware Cloud Foundation. Now, VxRail, what makes it different? Well, it's not the vSAN, it's not the vSphere, it's not the vCenter. What makes it different is a piece of software called VxRail Manager. And that makes lifecycle management just one touch, very easy. It allows you to deploy it, allows you to manage it. It allows you to download all your update files at once, rather than having to go hunting for the specific drivers for your vSAN cluster, right? One thing I will say, as a hybrid cloud environment, if we look at what VMware are doing with their license fees currently, for a VMware hyperconverged play, the one that makes the most sense and is actually a lot cheaper under the new licensing conditions than under the old licensing conditions, is a hyperconverged environment running VMware Cloud Foundation. Doing that under the new license terms and the new license bundles is cheaper than doing it as separate licenses under the perpetual licensing model, which I didn't think would be the case, but we are where we are. So that is worth looking into. But what if you're not a VMware house? And what if maybe you're not too happy about the way that VMware has started moving in certain directions? Well, if you're a Microsoft house, you can use Azure Stack HCI. We have AX nodes, which, I mean, the slide's not as snazzy, but essentially it performs the same operations, right? You can have these at the edge. You can have these in your core data center. You can have Azure Arc to allow you to integrate with multiple clouds. Essentially, the way that Azure Arc works, if people haven't seen it, is it runs everything as an Azure service. So whichever cloud it's running in, you will run it as an Azure service. And it can sit in AWS or GCP. And it gives you that ability to almost spread your risk across the clouds, but still have a single management plane. And that ties me back into what is the key thing to remember about Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI is hybrid cloud by design. When it was first launched, there was a little bit of concern or confusion about what it actually was. What it isn't is just Microsoft's current HCI platform. You want on-prem HCI with no cloud integration? We can do that running Windows Server and storage spaces direct. On the AX nodes again, Azure Stack HCI is purely hybrid. Everything that runs on Azure Stack HCI is running as an Azure service. So that's really important to know, that kind of differentiation. And in the interest of time,
you need a subscription for that as well, don't you?
Yep, you do. You need your Azure subscription to run your Azure services. I'm not going to steal Adam's thunder too much. See, I'm looking at two people who are following me and thinking, am I stepping on any toes here? But I'm not. It's all good. Well, I got the easy bit. I get to go first. I can say what I like, and they've got to adapt. Everyone's on their toes. So, Apex. It's quite a small word, but it's very big and filled with meaning for Dell. What is Apex? Well, ultimately, Apex can be anything, right? It's a state of mind, man. It's vibes. It's, well, portfolio of subscription-based technology solutions. What does that mean? Well, you can either purchase products through Apex, you can subscribe to products through Apex, you can even just subscribe to a service through Apex. And when we're talking hybrid multi-cloud, it also means in this purchase products or subscribe to a product, these columns, we have platforms called Apex Cloud Platforms, which are based around currently Azure or Red Hat OpenShift. And they will give you the hardware to run these hybrid cloud environments on an Apex subscription with the hardware underlying it being the Dell hardware. Okay. While we're here, I thought I should probably tell you what we've got. There's a lot of racks behind us here. I'm a big fan of the racks. I love all the flashing lights. In fact, if I could present in this room every day, I'd be happy. I'd be distracted a lot, but I'd be happy. So what have we got? Well, let's start from the bottom and work our way up. So we've got AX nodes. We don't currently have them. They're out on evaluation with a customer. But I think that proves a point. We've got them. If you want to see what they're like, it's best to get hands-on with them yourself. So that's your Azure Stack HCI. We've got various different, anything that starts with D here is a data protection solution. So we've got DP4400, DD64, and DM55. You've got to change the letters, right? You can't just have them all be DDs, DPs, whatever. You've got to change it. It helps identify what's what. We've got a couple of different primary production storage arrays. So we've got the Unity, we've got the Power Store. We've also got unstructured data. So this is something that's growing and becoming more and more important to our customers, is what to do with unstructured data. I mean, I feel like I'd be talking to, teaching, I'm not even going to go down that route. Something about sucking eggs anyway. But when we're talking NHS Trust, right, you know about unstructured data, you know about the size of data that you have, the amount of data that you need to store, and how you can't really do anything with that. You can't make use of these advanced techniques of data reduction or deduplication or compression, because these are all compressed. These are all pre-compressed, pre-reduced files. They're just big, right? So what you need is a scale-out platform. That's what PowerScale gives you. It's a scale-out file store. Great. We've got different virtual editions that you can use. So spin up some virtual data domain, which is data protection, or Unity, which is primary storage. Or you can just get hands-on and have a look at the software that underpins it all. So we've got all that in here, whichever way we want to go. I didn't even mention VxRail, right? But everything that's running, if you go around the other side of the central column, there's a Red Hat demo connected to Alexa. So you can chat and ask it to do certain things. That's all powered off VxRail. All the compute in the BSC is powered off our VxRail. So there's a lot of kit in here. Let's make use of it. There's a guy who's here most days of the week called Nick Eastwell. He loves a demo. Just use him, abuse him. That's what he's here for. Well, don't tell him I said that, but that's what he's here for. Right. I feel like I've talked a little bit slower than I should have done, but let's go through some compromises that we need to take into account. So when we're talking about putting your workloads in the right place, there's no good talking about putting stuff at the edge if your connectivity is not right. So you need to make sure your networking is right. You need to make sure you have all of that established before you put some AI or data gathering solution at the edge, right? Again, it's no good putting everything in the cloud if you're struggling with latency with your internet connection. So all of that very much underpins that choice. There's no point having a multi-cloud or a hybrid multi-cloud solution if you have to train different people to do different things. Right? You need to cover that manageability piece. And in each instance that I've talked around, whether it's Azure Stack around VxRail, even if it's Red Hat, OpenShift, there is an underlying management platform that we can use for that. So essentially single pane of glass management, no matter where your workload is. The biggest issue for people who have come to us asking to come away from a cloud-first strategy or a cloud-only strategy is they just don't know what they've got until they get the bill. So that visibility is key in all these solutions, which ties into the cost point. You never want to not know what you're spending until you get the bill. It's like when I used to get my phone bill and it was like, yeah, that's not ideal. I used to have to explain that to my mum. That was not a lot of fun. And then the last one, which often gets overlooked, is the people who are actually managing this environment, the people who are actually dealing with this kit or these workloads, what do they know about? What are they comfortable using? Are you going to have to retrain them on something completely new? VCF, for example. If you know VMware, you know VCF. It's a very similar user experience to everything VMware. Azure Stack HCI, if you know Azure, you're using the Azure portal, right? It's not a big retraining everyone solution, which ties into the in-house capabilities piece, which I'm going to skirt through because I'm running into Adam's time here. So this is basically saying, do we need to retrain everyone? Do we have server storage and networking from a 3-tier perspective on different refresh cycles? And if you need to buy more servers, does that mean the storage team needs to get involved to give you more bandwidth, or the networking team for more bandwidth? That's the historical 3-tier approach, right? Where you have individual teams managing individual things. Security and governance is huge, right? As I'm sure you guys are all aware, right? If people move to the cloud on the understanding or the assumption that the cloud providers would deal with security for them, they do not. So that is something that we all need to be taking into account when we're preparing these solutions. And the key use of a hybrid cloud environment that we're finding is people saying, well, I need this particular workload to be somewhere I can physically see where it is. Right? It needs to be on-prem in our data center. I don't want to just send it out to the cloud and assume it's going to be okay. A little bit of paranoia in that statement, but it is what we're hearing. So let's cater to that. Let's make it easy for people to know where their workloads are. So that's what we do. And this is all about AWS local zones, which kind of reinforces that security and governance piece, especially around sensitive data. You really need to be careful about what zones you set up. It might be that you've got set up EMEA and you didn't realize. Well, that can mean your data sits anywhere here and you don't know about it. So as any tier 1 vendor, we're going to talk about sustainability a lot, right? A lot of cost savings by using Apex also reduces the hardware used. That leads to greater efficiencies, lower costs, and there's the sustainability angle of not having to produce more tin. And let's summarize that. So first up, we need to assess the workloads. We need to know what you have. Because if we don't know what you've got, how are we going to make sure it's in the right place? Then we need to evaluate the environment. What do you currently have? Right? Is it all on one platform? Is it across multiple platforms? Is it some in the cloud? Let's find out what your teams are capable of. What skills do we currently have? Let's not try and reinvent the wheel. And let's keep that security element front of mind. And here's me back to being a broken record. One size very much does not fit all. We've got a load of kit. Let's use it. Let's help you. If you've got any concerns about any of it, if you want to just see how it's the same, how it's different, how we do all of these things I've sold the dream of, let's get hands-on with some kit. And also, if you just want to run a live optics, just get in touch with the guys at Access and get that run for you. And that's me done. I'm going to hand over to Adam.